This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, this is official now. I'm welcoming everyone and excited to talk about this theme of the cultural creatives. Some of you already know that I've written about it. I'm excited about the emergence. I love the concept of kind of bottom-up change. And this is truly an example of cultural change coming from the bottom up and not yet really recognized by a lot of people. One of the things that's interesting about the research that Paul Ray did about the cultural creatives, okay, I think, oh, that's something else. Sorry, shut my computer off here. Okay, the numbers that he cited in the little video have been updated when he wrote the book in 2000 called Cultural Creatives, How 50 Million People Are Changing the World. The updated numbers are around 80 million in the United States and about 120 million in Europe. And similarly, percentages, 25% or so in Japan and South Korea, Australia, etc. So that's exciting. As a Simply Living bookstore manager back in the day in 2000, we sold many copies of the Cultural Creatives book. And I've been liking it and enjoying it for many years without really returning to it. Somehow I got back onto it and I discovered that Paul Ray had done this slide deck, which I'm going to present in a minute, and we can talk. And you're welcome to raise your hand. You can see how to do that in the way you, I'm not sure how you do it, but there's a way to raise your hand. I think it's in the reactions. So you can raise your hand, or you can just unmute and raise your physical hand that I can see on your picture. So either way, feel free to kind of interrupt, and I'm happy to entertain things as we go. Otherwise, I'll move through pretty quickly. You can jot down any questions you have, and we'll take those at the end. I wanted to say that I've really tried hard to reach. I found a Paul Ray email. I wanted to invite him to be the star here instead of me do the interpretations. But he's got to be pretty far up there. He's older than I am, I'm sure. And his wife, who's the co-author with the original book, her name is I forget. Sherry Anderson. Now I remember. But she's deceased. So, I hope he's still going. I'd still love to get in touch with him. I've tried LinkedIn, different ways to try to find him, and I have with no success. And one of the things I love about the internet is being able to find like that video and actually see Paul Ray talking. You can find pictures of him, of course, on the Google images, whatever. But I really enjoy the little video. And so, hi, Suzanne, how are you doing? Good to see you here. She has got this thing. Oh, I got to figure out how to, I'll just move it away. My dings constantly. Okay, now I will begin and share the screen for the 44 slides. Some of you may have looked at it. I think it's fine to go over it again. There's a lot of interesting, let's see, I'm gonna do this first. Okay. Share screen. Okay, you should be able to see it and see if I can make it. Does that make it a little bigger? Or you can turn this into speaker mode and you'll see, I think, the slides. And the first slide is creating a wisdom culture, which may be a little idealistic, but I think that's one of the exciting things about this this concept of an emerging culture. And and I think there's a lot of rationale for calling it a wisdom culture. Paul Ray was also involved, and I think I forwarded this to you, Paul, because I know you're interested in the global economy, the business and interest, and he was part of that a collaboration with the business community internationally. And he saw positive things everywhere. And maybe that's why I like him so much. I tend to look at the cup being half full. And so at any rate, you can try that email, but it is Paul H. Ray, but it doesn't work. Okay. Let's see if we've got it going here. All right. One of the things that I love about this whole concept is that it's arriving at a time when uh-oh, I must have hit it on the wrong thing here. Okay, I'll try to go one at a time. I might have hit something that made it go automatically, but I don't want to do that. Well, okay. I guess I can go back and pause it. Okay, see if that works. Okay, and I just feel like this big picture, damn, well, I didn't anticipate this happening. I don't know how to stop. Well, that goes back to the beginning, but it's not going to stop it. Okay. All right. I'm back at the beginning. I'm trying to go one-headed. All right. See if it, I did this 2 or 3 times and it never did this. So I don't know what I hit. Okay. Maybe it's, since it's starting over, it'll do it properly. What I wanted to emphasize here is it's a time of amazing change, a watershed in history, as he said, as big as the Rocky Mountains. We cannot go on as before because more of the same is physically impossible. Most trends of the past are not sustainable. So then we go to the next slide. And again, part of that is his framing of this is, we either go up to a wisdom culture and planetary integration, as big as the Industrial Revolution has been in the previous centuries, or we go down to eco-collapse and the end of advanced civilization, very poor chances to restart from zero, and all easy resources are now used up.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay, so as this is, again, part of this big picture, no longer an era of change, but a change of eras. And I think that's consistent with my own view, and I'm curious to hear what you all think. I believe that this is emerging into a new era. Maybe it's the long delayed Aquarian age that we learned about in the 60s. Some of us did. But to be a change agent, that means new dangers emerging that we have not seen before, new opportunities emerging we don't know how to benefit from, and the recent past is a very poor guide to our new future. Okay, so it's gonna wait, and I consider everybody here a change agent, so be prepared. The world is getting better and better and worse, faster and faster. So I think that's something we all feel, the speed of change, and there's some horrible things going on, but also some really good, promising things going on. Okay, no longer an era of change, but that's kind of his slide title for this series of slides, but a change of eras. Climate change is now obvious, dangerous, and irreversible. Glaciers melting, sea levels rising, ports flooded, crop failures, diseases, famines, peak oil and energy crises, extinctions and population crashes, which I think, again, most of you here are quite well aware of that. The climate change is now happening now, as they like to say. Now the glaciers, then and now, dramatic, sad. Finally, even Time magazine gets it. Special report on global warming. Be worried, be very worried. Well, most of us are. Big downside of economic risk, that we're at a subcritical state just before the avalanche of crises. Each wrinkle of disruption threatens the integrity of the whole system. We see that in the stock market recently. And what to do about the money system. Peak oil crisis in fluid fuels, runaway weather systems, runaway US debt crisis, Iran nuclear weapons crisis. We could add, of course, the war in Ukraine. There's no shortage. 400 known crises over 20 years. So he's framing that, over the last probably more like 2000 to 2020, close to that. And linked crises trigger each other: famines, genocides, weather disasters, depressions, peak oil resource wars. The era's crises become in bunches. They may overwhelm our collective capacity to respond. If were it not for us wildly visionary folks who will help make a layered transition. I won't go into this in detail, but you can see he's saying here that there's a period on the left side of the graphic of growing instability, ups and downs, and then there's directions we can go. It's going to go down pretty far, falling in a hole, and or to death, or attempting to recreate the old level, falling short, or surging up to the stable new level. So this is from I think it's Eric Laszlo, who has a lot of interesting theories about evolution and very much aware of the different dimensions of how evolution happens at the different levels. Evolution happening at the cellular level, and we're figuring out that this is a really big picture, but the reality is we're finding that that's how evolutionary change happens from the bottom up at every level of reality, every level of the physical reality. We're even figuring out that the transition of life evolving from matter to spirit is something that we're pretty close to. My next article on Medium will be about that theory. Okay, next. And again, that's another version of a big picture, how we hopefully can get to the wisdom culture. And I should mention that Eric, it's not Eric, it's something Laszlo. Anyway, yeah, he looks at some interesting ways where we can really envision and drive this on the road. So yeah, we can say it's bad, it's good, but we have the responsibility now to make it happen if we want to go to where we need to go. Now he's talking about the culture wars 50 years ago, 50% moderns, 50% traditionals, which he mentioned in the, this is the typical subcultures in the United States, where he talked about in the video, talking about the moderns and the traditionals, rural and urban, hip up to date, square out of date. Kind of a generalization here, but I love the Cary Grant, Lauren Bacall, Jimmy Stewart, Hugh Nelson. Some of you are old enough to remember. There are 3 subcultures today as of 2000. Again, these slides are updating what he originally came up with. So the traditionals, 24.5%, and that's right about where we know from the Trump era that there's some really solid people that are fighting back against the onslaught of change, and the moderns are kind of caught in the middle, and they're still half the population. And the cultural creatives, he estimates there are 26%. And if past trends continue, this should be 28 to 30% in 2006, which fits all the data. He's projecting, again, I think I mentioned the new dates I came up with as of about 2017, projecting 80 million in the United States and 120 million in Western Europe. Okay, cultural creators, they're literally creating a whole new culture for our time. And I'll go to moving through. cultural creatives can be the carrier population for a wisdom culture. I love that phrase. I think Simply Living and the groups that are working and the many social movements that have appreciated those social movements and the young people who are taking for granted much of the outcomes of the social movements we've had in the 20th, 21st, late 20th and well, since the 1960s, all the ones that you can think of, from civil rights, women's movement, environmental movement, multicultural, spiritual evolution, et cetera. So they're comprised of the core constituency of most of these new social and consciousness movements in North America and Europe. Values, again, he emphasizes very critically, this is about values. What are the values? That's the secret sauce of culture change. When values change, the culture changes. And so the cultural creatives, one of the key things is loving nature. I'm willing to bet every one of us here is a lover of nature. Values are deeply concerned about its destruction, makes sense. Relationships, altruism, a little outdated. Some of you remember Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid. Women's issues and spirituality. Again, definitely something that I think we all embrace. Peace movement and anti-war. Boy, the peace movement has been weak, but it seems to be reconstituting a little bit with the Ukraine war in Russia, the proxy war. And anti-globalization. So if you remember the Battle of Seattle, the Occupy movement. So again, powerful change movement that is not necessarily as active today. At the same time, it did create the message about the Bernie Sanders message, the 1% versus the 99%, the incredible inequality of the people in the United States. Reject materialism, getting and spending. I've read Culture Jam and a longtime subscriber to Adbusters magazine, The Uncooling of America. In any case, certainly this fits very well with Simply Living. Again, we don't espouse in Simply Living any particular aspect of spirituality, and I think that's again part of what they're saying in the cultural creatives is that it's not necessarily about a religion, Methodist or Catholic or Mohammed, Islam or whatever. It's about the spiritual values and social justice, social responsibility, and spirituality and personal growth. Certainly, that's a characteristics of most of us trying to make our way to a more wise, enlightened path. Linking the personal and the planetary, the elders and generations to come. I like that one. I do this work for my grandkids. So it's about floods of new information worldwide over the last 40 years. Planetary environment, ecology, health beyond catastrophic medicine or allopathic medicine, organic food versus environmental poisons, spiritual traditions from everywhere, nuclear, infotech, biotech, nanotech, all go from promise to threats. That's when we, I'm writing about that in my next article. It's about women's values and concerns going public for the first time in recorded history. I think that's worth repeating. The first time in recorded history that I think people are recognizing, even like in the business community, we've discovered that women make better managers. This is just a pretty objective fact at this point. It's about the role of new social movements and consciousness movements in educating the Western world over the past 40 years. So all this effort to deconstruct African Americans and their role in the culture and understanding the true history, or Native Americans and indigenous people generally. They mentioned the women's movement, but all of the efforts that we've been making over time to create, for example, in the universities now you can study women's studies. You can major in it. You can study sustainability. You can study environmental stuff. You can study or at least get courses in local economic development. And racism is recognizing that. I always have to share my word for white people have are pigmentally challenged. Let that sink in. I'm sure you get. We have a problem with people of color. Okay. Okay. Again, listing these things that we just a review of those that we talked about. And the new political compass. I think this is. You get the idea there without me going over the details. In front, almost the emerging issues, cultural creatives, the new progressive. I would just, you could call it the Bernie Sanders agenda. But he just puts a label on the percent of the people who are evolving from cultural conservatives to business conservatives to modernists, liberals. And again, we've still got another dozen or so. Solar economy is now feasible. So this was several years ago, and now we know that it's definitely doable. We can produce hydrogen from water, clean hydrogen versus, using fracked gas to create the hydrogen for storage. Big solar farms, China and India are developed with less CO2. Green and alternative claims and stances will get taken up for survival by most of society. So I think that's happening. Surging demand for green and social responsible strategies. Going green, synergies and subsidies, big business and big finance will finally get on board. Household transformation, a hallmark of Simply Living's lifestyle changes. And this is a quote that he, I'm sure, took from the book called Voluntary Simplicity by Dwayne Elgin. Living outwardly simpler, but inwardly richer lives. Yes, do with less, but increase your quality of life. Making a virtue of necessity. Spiritual growth over your entire life cycle. Initiations of birth, youth, middle age, elders, and death. And I think now we have elders and attending the death cafes that are emerging. Access to the whole planet's spiritual riches. And there's a lot. So it's beyond incremental change, which is hard for a lot of people to grasp, but it is not gradual in these times. There's a need for resilient communities, and we need a buffer against supply disruption, buffer against collapse of government services, buffer against hunger, cold, and weather, buffer against lawlessness. So, but there's a need for social inventions, but not top-down, elite-driven ones to only benefit big money and power. Bottom-up, bubbling from the people who are most affected. Massive parallel social invention, which I think is going on all the time when we see the growth in community solar, the growth in redesigning our whole local food system, and recognition for the relationship between the food, the big agricultural food system and health, etc. So the wise community strategist sees the handwriting on the wall, opens an exploratory process for new opportunities, and declares a big enough dream for the emerging world. And that's why we have the Citizens Wisdom Culture Design Charrette, which I have not actually looked at, but I guess it's on the website there. A collective, okay, I'll say this later. Collectively, in the field of the group, we can see what no one of us can see, the shape of the emerging new planetary civilization. As we, it's too big a transition to recognize, everybody can't just predict this is going to be the future. It's going to be different, localized cultures all around the planet. So again, he does this counterclockwise view, ending up in the middle with new kinds of community that are ecologically rooted. The whole person in a mature society, humans in Gaia as emerged in the earth itself, the society of organizations, which is more broad-based rather than a society of dominant international corporations. Okay. So we need to build for the emerging culture and emerging planet for the road ahead, not for your familiar past and habitual practices, not steering your car by using the rear view mirror, which is a great quote or metaphor that Marshall McLuhan uses about how we approach the future. We tend to look in the rearview mirror and bring the past as much as we can into the future, and that's not going to work as well now. Today is like when ancient tribes needed to move to a new territory. Costly, big effort, major life changes, so there's big resistance to change. It takes a major vision of possibility to get people to move. It often needs wise leadership. Wisdom says, make your costly new move to grasp new opportunities when you have a big surplus. For us all, equal this decade. Don't wait until you're nearly starving and you have to go to a new territory in survival mode. Wisdom says, make your risky move to the new territory in good company. Create simply living. Make it an altruistic and visionary game, and more good people will come with you, not just the greedy opportunist. Okay, a culture that supports sustainability beyond nationalism and planetary integration. One humanity, one planet. Alliance of civil society and business. Business doing good. Social enterprise. I think that's definitely a trend among the young entrepreneurs. Reinventing community, like the Transition Network, which we're affiliated with at Simply Living, as an international movement to not wait for government or industry to reinvent from the top down, but let's do it ourselves from the bottom up and work with converging trends like those I just mentioned. And finally, the future is a design problem. In well-designed systems, we don't have to fix messes that should not have been made in the first place. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed each time I look through it. Okay, we're back to the not share. And we're open now for thoughts, ideas, concerns. Is this too idealistic for you? I obviously share these values, and I think Simply Living shares those values. I think my conversations with Jan Spencer indicate that he shares these values, and he's doing it in Eugene, Oregon, right, Jan?
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, absolutely. The effort continues, and now that you mention it, I'm going to put something in chat. I've been working on what I like to call a primer for paradigm shift. And it's a collection, certainly builds on items, things I've heard from other people. We've all heard, we share, I think everybody here, if they were to see the primer, they would see some familiar content, but I think I could guarantee you see a lot of content you never even thought of before that I think is goes further than just talking about, wow, we've got problems and wouldn't it be nice to do something about it. The primer contains a lot of information about what people can do in their own lives. And of course, I'm sure a good number of people here are doing a lot of that already. I know one of Chuck's favorite terms, and mine too, is voluntary simplicity. But if we think that the future is going to be a green version of what we have right now, I don't think it's going to be that way. So one of the focus of the primer is what cultural creatives, I don't even really use that word much myself, but it's a good word. But what are people doing all over the country, including in Columbus, Ohio, and other places? Cincinnati is another, I know. but I have a radio program and I've had interviews with people all over the place, from Syracuse, New York to Los Angeles, of people who are already doing this stuff. They're already living paradigm shift, already spending a good deal of time in that preferred future, and I include myself too. So maybe I've said enough. I'm certainly can give more detail, but what I'll do at this moment is I will put this item into the chat. It's
Yeah, that's good.
the primer. I have 3 of the 4 episodes are on YouTube right now, and I'm working on the 4th. So I'll do that, and sure. Thanks for organizing this, Chuck.
And Jan brought up the point that we can't just continue the state of where we are by making things more sustainable, by creating green products, and still use the same amount of energy that we've been using, and just have it be green energy. That would be desirable, of course, but at the same time, it's a more deep and complex shift that has to happen. It's not just the idea of doing things a little better in different sectors of the economy or our culture. And I think because we're still in a consumer culture, buying things, and I like to remind people that 40 to 42% of everything you grab off the shelf or that you purchase has 42% embedded carbon. This is from a deconstruction done by the Rocky Mountain Institute. So it's looking at from the big origins of the supply chain to the disposal of the product. If you look at that picture, this is not what we can, little shifts are not going to happen. And the exciting thing to me about cultural creatives is that it uses the word culture. It's the culture shift. And I've mentioned this before. Betsy got me on to Charles Eisenstein, who makes this same point. Yes, all the metrics that we talk about are what we need to do in shifting to green energy, reforming and redesigning our agriculture and our energy systems. Yes, those are all critical, and we need to do them. But the way to do them, make sure that it's really going to happen, is to have a group of people like cultural creatives that are able to see themselves as a new culture, as the way forward. I just heard a C-SPAN talk by Marianne Williamson, which is to me a great example of a person who's running for president of the United States, has all the values of every of the cultural creatives, and is bridging the gap between the inner and the outer. The activists need to become more spiritual. The spiritual people become more active. There's Marianne Williamson, a classic New Age visionary for the last 50 years, 40 years at least. And so to me, that symbolizes the recognition finally that these two groups, the core activists and the core spiritually focused people, are beginning to recognize each other and create a coherent culture. I will be quiet until someone else talks. And then
Betsy has her hand up.
Oh, who got the hand up?
Betsy.
Oh, Betsy. Oh, I see it. Yeah, I see it way up in the corner.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck, for continuing to push the optimism. I guess for me, what I did not see, and it looks like that is about 20 years old. Was it done in 2020? I couldn't tell with the slides.
The slides
Or not 2020, but when was it done?
Well, in 2000, the book was written, but the slides were actually drew from that 2020 research, but also was done later, around 2015 or 16.
Okay, so it's going on 10 years old.
Yeah,
now.
yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, so I guess the thing that I have concern about is I feel like it's all about the youth, and it's all about multiculturalism. It's all about economic diversity. It's all about the leadership emerging through those folks. And so, not to dismiss old white men, I love them, some of them. But I think for me, I would be extremely excited to see words and thoughts coming through Indigenous folks, African Americans, those who have been under the foot of the 1%ers. You know, to me, until there is the way to provide the support and the linkage to get their voices and their views heard, I'm really not that interested in hearing from this guy. I gotta be honest.
Well, no, that's why, that's why we're having a
You
discussion.
know, because even though we say you can't, you know, use the rear view mirror, I think it is using the rear view mirror. I think it was using the rear view mirror in a certain way. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead.
Well, since Betsy gave one point of view, I'll do the exact opposite point of view. I absolutely loved it. I loved the whole part about the wisdom culture. I love how he put all the pieces together. I love the dreaming part. I mean, we don't dream anymore. We're all so damn practical about, you know, we can't be visionary. We can't be transformative. How are we going to make the next buck? I mean, so what he shared just resonated so much with me. So I'm so glad I joined tonight, Chuck, because all the different pieces I just really resonated with me. And maybe it's because I'm an old white guy that was against the Vietnam War, and I get it, right? I mean, so Chuck and I think we were part of the counterculture since the 60s, and we made big choices where we were really on the outs back, you know, so we think like the 20-year-olds. So I think we might be old white guys that think like a BIPOC young guy. So I don't know. That's my perspective.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul, and I would relate that to what, because I think, Betsy, think about the young people that are coming up. To me, they are the big cohort that takes these things that we're talking about for granted, right? The young people, they understand that there's only all humans. There's one humanity. It's global. They assume that. The idea of women being equal. Hey, they get it. They know this intuitively. The multiculturalism, the environment, and even more broadly than the youth who take a lot of this for granted. I think that they've done surveys that show the majority of Americans, up around 70%, say, yes, we need to transition to clean energy. You know, the majority of people want the kinds of changes that these new values that Paul Ray describes in the cultural creatives are, that's real. I think another point I would make is that when he did the research, he discovered that the people who were in his category of new demographic cultural creatives, the people who were doing the spiritual stuff weren't aware, or the activist people weren't aware that they were in a new demographic. They would interview somebody at work. They'd say, well, do you talk about these values that you have to your coworkers? Oh, no, I wouldn't dare, because they would be too far out. But I think that's changing. There are more and more people that, if you started up a conversation about alternative food or medicine at work, you wouldn't be so ostracized. People recognize that the fast food is not the answer to. It is the answer if you want obesity and type 2 diabetes, but otherwise, so I think it's changing. You just make my case. And Jan has his hand up there. Go ahead.
Little electronic hand. It's the magic hand. Remember, we know what the magic hand is. Yeah, I'd like to just share a little bit about one of actually the fourth part of the primer that I'm working on right now. I've already written it. I've already recorded it. It's going to be my next radio program. But what I do is I put an audio track and I put pictures to it, and graphics, to make this stuff visible. So I'm working on that part. But the topic of how do we get this information out to a wider audience, that is what I'm working on right now. I've got all this great parts 1, 2, and 3. So awesome information. How does this go out to a wider audience? I think one point of departure is that our current thinking, and I mean just pretty much most of us, and I also include most of the progressive organizations that we know about, and I would, stretching it a little bit, I would even include the Sierra Club, and something like that, the League of Women Voters. There's lots of organizations that are doing important work, social justice, the environment, homelessness, affordable housing, healthy food. I consider virtually every progressive organization that's mainstream, totally mainstream, but they're doing good work, but they're all exist to repair damage caused by capitalism as we know it. And if our government was actually doing the work it should be doing, it should be the government that's looking after the environment and public health. But the government is so invested in the way things are and being a servant of the economic system. I think, we all agree it needs to be from the bottom up. People need to do this stuff in their own lives, in their own neighborhoods. I think people should be the example. We've heard, be the change. I can't think of a more important thing to do than to be out there. Well, we're all boomers. How many of us are riding bikes? Maybe some of us can't even ride bikes anymore. But to get this message out, what I'd love to see is organizations and their leadership or their membership to see beyond the box we live in. We're thinking somehow, how can we move towards a preferred future within the context of what we're used to? We need to think beyond capitalism. We need to think beyond the consumer culture and to behave that way as well. So what I'd like to see is organizations, these mainstream organizations, explain to their memberships, this is a stretch, but this makes a lot of sense, by downsizing, living more ecologically, spending money. How do we use our own time and money? Putting our own time and money into the kind of world that we want to see. And then that frees up a lot of time, a lot of money for investing. And I don't necessarily mean in some Fortune 500 company, but investing in our neighborhoods and our local communities instead of vanity spending, which we all do a lot of, some more than others. But organizations, I'd love them to see the Sierra Club, for example, have articles in their paper or in their magazine. 3 million members to the Sierra Club. American Association of Retired Persons, 35 million members. I'd love to see those.
Jen, this is great, but Betsy's had her hand up for a while and there's some people haven't spoken and it's almost 8, just not in all due respect.
Well, say what you want to say. I didn't hear what you.
Well, well, first of all, Betsy, your hand's still up. If you have to take
Yeah.
it down after.
Yeah, well, let me just complete this in a couple of minutes.
Okay,
So if these organizations would share with their membership thinking out of the box, then I think we get a lot further with, I submitted an idea to the AARP. I said I could write a wonderful article about a senior who's done a permaculture repurpose of a 1/4 acre suburban property, reduce carbon, reduce eco footprint, exercise. I didn't even hear back from them. I did the same thing for the Sierra Club, never even heard back. They're not even serious about addressing the problems. So thinking out of the confines that they exist in, and maybe they're too worried about their corporate sponsors. I don't know, but I certainly encourage people to take a look at these links that I put over in the chat.
yeah. Well,
Awesome
thanks,
information.
Jan.
It's
The
the best stuff I know.
William Barber is making the same point you're making. We need to he calls it fusion politics, get all these organizations complementing each other and with a big umbrella, a big tent. And but as far as moving to the specifics, I think the lower down you get, we have some local Sierra Club events that do practical things, etc. But in any case, your point's well made. But Joanne, your hand's up.
I just wanted to, in response, also to Betsy, wasn't Paul Ray a sociologist who was more like reporting on this? And he wasn't, generating these ideas. Wasn't he reporting on what he saw in the culture and around the world and that sort of thing? I mean, and so isn't the book more like, I didn't read the book, that's why I'm interested in reading it, but isn't it, just, is the book itself more of a report on what he saw, or is it that just primarily in these slides?
I think, again, he was a sociologist, he was a researcher, he was at the University of Michigan. I mean, he was a professor type guy who, and his wife, Sherry Anderson, was a psychologist, and the two of them worked together, did hundreds, maybe thousands of interviews and focus groups to identify these characteristics that they had a hunch that this would be fruitful, and so it took them a long time, several years for doing this. And then in the latter part of Paul Ray's work, he became more of a kind of laying out some directions that we need to go in order to achieve what he identified as a wisdom culture. This was his extrapolation, the slides from the research they did. So yes, the book is more of a report, but written in a way that's pretty fun to read.
Well, then, it's an optimistic message for people.
Yes,
those of you, the individuals out there who are doing what Jan is doing, knows now that there's millions of other people out there doing this, trying to do the same thing. So
that's right. There's a lot of us.
Message, basically.
And it is 8 o'clock. I'm happy to stay on for a while, but I'd like to give people who have been muted and no pictures a chance to, if you like, to comment or ask a question before we close up. I'm looking at you, Suzanne Lentz. Looking at your name. But you have to unmute. Or you can lurk.
Well, I'm just here to listen.
Okay, that's good.
fine.
Appreciate it. Good to hear you. Haven't seen your face, but we
go.
get people.
There.
There you go. Hey, Suzanne. Long time Simply Living member.
Yeah.
Okay, and Suzanne's been involved with some really cool business projects. The what's the group of engineers called?
It's Go Sustainable Energy.
Go Sustainable Energy, which is a great business model. They take their fees based on the amount of money that they save the corporations they work for. They're great engineers. Paul, your hand was up.
Yeah, just one final comment from me. I stopped using bottom up, right? Because to me, that's a little unrealistic. So I use the term middle out. We got to get these CEOs. That's why I like what Paul Ray was saying as far as with the it's plus business. And it's not anti-capitalism, it's
Right.
beyond capitalism. So you got to, I think those of us that are speak quite a lot, it really matters the choice of our language. And I think we got to, watch. I mean, like what turns me off a lot is when those too far on the left talk about anti-capitalism. You know, it's beyond capitalism. We got to enhance what we're doing. And the same thing with bottom up. I just think that's impractical. It's got to be top down and bottom up. And that's why I love the terminology middle out. That's the last comment for me. Thanks, Chuck.
No, I appreciate that. And I think, people think, well, I love the middle out. I'll start using it, Paul. But I perceive the middle out as a way, as part of that is dealing with the inequality that we have, the income disparities. I think people think, oh, well, we can't have everybody living a middle-class lifestyle. That's not true. The people who are struggling, half the population in the United States can't manage a $400 expense. This is ridiculous. And so the changes that we can make, to me, will result in more people becoming part of the middle, moving up to the middle. And this, Tom Hartman calls the 0.1% as the morbidly rich. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I would love to see more egalitarian, communitarian, and it's the I just happened to watch. It's 2 hours, might be too much for some people, but I get sucked into these things. PBS Frontline has a nice piece on I think it's called something about money, the era of easy money or something like that. And I didn't really like the title, but he does. It's like 2 hours of interviewing all the people involved. The people at the top end of CEOs and people at the bottom end that can't get by. And as well as conversations with economists and commentary people. I found it fascinating and quite insightful about that we're all in this together. And I thought they did a nice job of not taking any positions. The guy was just interviewing people. And it came away with a lot of reflection on people who normally, most people's eyes glaze over. They just repeat every newscast says, well, the Dow Jones Industrial's up, or, the market's up or down. It doesn't mean anything. And this really deconstructs what that's about and how childlike the emotional tantrums that happen on Wall Street for anything that would threaten them from whatever profits. But it's global capitalism that's my issue. I'm all in favor of local economic development.
Chuck, can I just kind of butt in here about capitalism?
And
the fact of capitalism is we all know what the term external cost is. We know what an external cost is. Capitalism cannot survive without externalizing its cost on people and planet. That's how it makes money. We all know what an external cost is. The whole idea of trying to tax carbon is a tiny little effort to account, for that externalizing the cost. So that's why I say we cannot make a transition into a survivable future with an economic system that's based on profits, and it's not from a Marxist perspective.
What you're describing, Jan, is with your example, is an industry that I think should be nationalized. The industry, the profit-making fossil fuel industry needs to go, and the government needs to take it over. That's not even a legitimate, from my point of view, local. Somebody wants to start a restaurant and they want to introduce vegan foods. whatever. I might not go to it.
A preferred future will have a ton of economic opportunity,
Yeah,
absolutely, to
exactly.
be more local. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean we live like our grandparents do. I'm not interested in that. But a preferred future in my thinking is some of the good stuff. We can have a lot of the good stuff of modern technology, but
Yeah,
if we're smart, we can leave a lot of the baggage behind.
yeah. Well, I definitely want to keep the internet, and I want,
I do
and I'd
too.
like to keep
I
the
do too.
fair trade
Absolutely.
coffee and bananas available. So
But you may have to pay a lot more for some stuff.
that's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
you know, yeah,
And I speak from the middle.
yeah.
I'm a lucky one that's
Oh,
never,
we're unbelievably lucky. All of us
I
here
know.
are unbelievably lucky,
That's right.
myself included. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to close it off here, and we can, if I can find the.
Yeah, Chuck, I'm gonna let you know when I do sort of an unveiling of the primer, and I will invite you, to
Sure.
share it with your